Okay, welcome friends. It's good to see your faces as always on this Thursday. I have exciting news. I've got all kinds of exciting news. You know what today is? This will mark this in history. Did you know I have 5 children? And did you know my youngest daughter is 18 today? I can see your faces, but you're not. You're supposed to clap something. Yeah, Alina is and so I think I'm going to have like a whole bunch of ballet dancers through Sunday staying here, like a giant birthday slumber party. That's another story. But anyway, it reminds me, guess what? I'm going to do this really, really slowly. So much so you're not even going to think it's the same David Shaner. Because at 5 o'clock this morning, I decided to completely redo all of this. And you don't even know what all of this is. You just thought today I was going to talk about managing pain. I'm going to turn this into a series, not unlike Psychonton, because this is a really, 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 really big topic for me personally. And it's not like we've got, other pressing topics. But I made a conscious decision this morning at 5 o'clock that I was going to unpack this in ways that I am going to beg your patience and your indulgence and your patience. But I think this is really important, and that all of you, I always strive, as Toi Sensei said, for clarity, to be absolutely clear. Because if you're clear, you can be calm. If you're calm, you can perform to the best of your ability, and you take the mystery out of everything. And so while it's going to take some time for me to do this, maybe too much time in your opinion, I've been accused of being very Japanese in my lectures, because in the Japanese cultural worldview, context is everything. I'm looking at Matthew on the screen now. He's experienced in the last 3 years, if you're not paying attention to your context, the language doesn't work. Everything is hierarchical. And so what Matthew, he's nodding his head now, you really have to pay attention just to speak Japanese. There are words like sono, mono, kono, which are just replacement words for the subject of the sentence. It's just more elegant Japanese. I had a teacher once in graduate school who called it the donut theory of language. You're always talking around the topic because it's just too direct, too impolite to keep naming the topic that we're supposed to be following in the course of the conversation. So you use these placeholder words. Well, I've taken that to a whole nother level. Maybe it's the philosopher in me, but I'm going to peel the onion back, just as I did in Psychonton, as deeply as I care to, or as your patience will allow me to. And so what I was going to cover maybe in warp speed in one day, I think this is going to take 4 or even 5 sessions. And so I'm just going to tell myself, David, go slow. You don't have to share all this at this time. These are recorded, you put them all together. And I'd like to think that this will make a difference for not only you, but the people maybe that you can positively impact. I tell you what, my spider senses are telling me there might be a lot of interest in this, because as soon as Freiling Sensei sent this announcement out saying I was going to talk about managing pain, and I've never talked about this in any way in the kind of depth that I'm going to share over these next sessions. Many of you know, oh yeah, he's always had this ankle leg problem from a ski racing accident, but I'm going to peel it back because I didn't have the knowledge or information to share what I can share now, 51 years after I shattered my leg. And so this is very personal. So how did this shift come up at 5 in the morning? Because yesterday I was talking to Freiling Sensei and talking about this, and he said, Sensei, this has been, you've spent your life applying key principles, and in many different fields. And in one field, like in business for 35 years, and you've written books about it, and you've made it your business and developed a consulting practice and all this stuff. And he said, but what you're doing here with managing pain and the structure and the system that you've developed, this has been 51 years in the making. This might be more a part of you than even applying key principles in business. And I just kind of like, when he said it, I just kind of like let it roll off. And then as that percolated over the last 24 hours, I went, whoa, he's right. So what's holding you back, David? Like, why don't you share what you've never shared before? Because now you have a vocabulary and an understanding of the neuroscience behind what's happening, which I did not have at all. So for you to understand, say, the use of Toy Sensei's principles on this special topic of managing pain, it occurred to me to do just like in Sai Kon Tong, that if I peeled the banana back, it'd be like, when's the first time I heard the word Sai Kon Tong? Remember, it was the fall of 1976. I just moved to Hawaii to start graduate school. Toy Sensei saw me in the Palama Dojo training together. And remember, he said, Dabido, which is what he called me, will you take me to my hotel? And thus started a whole changed and significantly developed relationship that went on for a long, long time, culminating 27 years later in that whole Shokushu visit to Japan in 2003, when Tamura Sensei passed away. And that whole thing gave me the confidence to write Living with the Wind at Your Back, which was pretty huge. So this is on a pretty monumental scale. Okay, so now I'll just, oh, I said I'm gonna do this now too. Okay, forgive me, this is like you'll realize when I read this sentence, I'll probably do it every time. Just to be clear, I am not a medical doctor and I'm not offering medical advice, but I am going to discuss evidence-based self-care practices that are documented in scientific peer-reviewed journals that present mechanisms that in combination help to reduce inflammation and reduce pain. That's just to say that. And I'll intersperse that kind of stuff as we go. Okay, this first slide, actually, when I got up early this morning, I immediately contacted Matthew in Japan and I said, hey, I need a slide of this. Maybe don't put it up yet, Rich. Let me just talk about it first. You can see I'm making it up as I go. I'm trying to think of the best order to explain this. Okay, in the time that I have, in the last few years, where I've spent a lot of time trying to think through this idea of managing pain and what's really going on. You know, the doctors basically say I should be experiencing a ton of pain. But I'm not. And when I answer the question, as I've answered the question, like in business, when people say, how do you do that? What are you doing with these big companies? And I'd say, I don't know. It's Aikido in a business suit. And people would ask me, or the doctors, when they would see my MRI and x-rays, and they said, how is it possible you're not just screaming in pain with every step you take? And I'd say, well, I just don't think about it. There's a lot there that's not just mind over matter, use your willpower, be macho, suck it up. That's not it at all. It's far more sophisticated. And that's what I want to share with you. So thank you for your patience. I want to start out, people say, oh, you're going to talk about pain management. In fact, I even say managing pain all the time. And the people closest to me, like Freiling Sensei, he his brain processes, I'm saying managing pain, but then when he writes back to me something that I said, he'll type out pain management. He's not the only one, because his brain is playing tricks on him too. Everyone thinks, oh, it's pain management. But I want to start off really, really basic. I don't use the word pain management. To me, that's like a noun. That's a thing. That's something that somebody else is doing for me. Like I'm in pain, so I go to a doctor, maybe even a pain specialist in rehab medicine. And you kind of go in there complaining and you're hoping they'll fix you. And they're either going to give you opioids or maybe injections, steroid injections. And oh, by the way, I've had that. I've had steroid injections in my shoulder. So I know what it's like to be in screaming acute pain. I know what it's like to be in severe back pain where you're laying in the bed for 2 days. That's acute pain. You need to see your doctor. I'm not against even steroids and opioids if it's a crisis. What I'm saying is the kind of pain that I have, which is musculoskeletal pain, not cancer pain, not neuropathic pain. There's all different kinds of pains, which we will get into over the next sessions. Because I want you to understand the difference, because if I can share what I can share, you're going to be in a position to not only help yourself, but maybe help other people. And if, for free, right? This is eliminating suffering. And I'm just a personal testimony of one person, but I do think you can help other people with this. And I have in the last few years in actual classes, both in 2018 and 2019, all filled with seniors who are all suffering from chronic pain. So this has all been developing over some time. Why do I not say pain management? Well, because that's somebody doing something to you. What I'm proposing is when you're in pain, if you're in a chronic, the politically correct word, by the way, in the rehab medical field today is to say persistent pain, not chronic pain. But if you have persistent pain, what most people refer to as chronic pain, that's a 24/7 proposition. That as felt, I'll use that term quite a bit, how you are processing your pain is a very personal thing that differs. We're going to get into that. That's called the biopsychosocial model of pain perception. So it's an active process. And this is not unlike the concept of time management. I've always told in my consulting business, I've used this story for years. I said, nobody manages time, right? That's a myth. Don't ask me to teach you time management. Because time we all have together. A day is one revolution of the earth. A year is once around the sun. We all have the same time. What we manage is our attention. What we manage is where we choose to prioritize our time. And that's how we experience time. That's like as felt time. So, the phrase in English anyway, time flies when you're having fun, like when you're totally engaged. Like when I'm teaching these classes, you cannot believe an hour has passed because you've been hanging on every word. It just goes so fast because you're totally engaged. Thank you, Toby, for laughing. That was meant as a shutka. But when you were sitting in organic chemistry, man, for me, time went really slow. Man, it was everything I could do to not stare at the clock because I was not engaged at all in these benzene rings. So time as we experience it is a function of our intentionality. Now, could I have the first slide, Rich? So this just came to me this morning. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. Just kidding. This is a word that Dogen Kigen, the founder of the Soto tradition in Japan, what we call Zen, the practice of Zazen. Dogen Kigen, in his work Shobogenzo, which is 90 plus fascicles, in each fascicle, it'd be like a Dharma talk. And the question would be, what is learning, or what is the nature of reality? In this case, the question that he wanted to write about was, what is time? And Dogen was very creative. Remember, Dogen was the one that made up the word that Toi Sensei loved. and really imitated, called Shinjin Gakudo. Shinjin Gakudo, that's like body-mindology. Shinjin, body-mind, Gaku, which is logos, do, the way of body-mindology. That's another fascicle and a term that Dogen made up. Well, this character, Uji, is really interesting. My dissertation chairman, Thomas Patrick Kasoulas, has published a lot on this, and he translates Uji in English as being time, one word, like body-mind, right? Being time. What these two characters are, the first character, U, like from Uji, that's the character that, it's like ontos in Greek. It means being or existence, the first character. So it's really an ontological term. What is the nature of reality? And then ji, in Japanese, if I said nanji desu ka, I'm saying, what time is it? Ji is like o'clock. What o'clock is it? So it's a word he makes up, being o'clock, being time. And what he's suggesting is that when you're in the present moment, when you're actually experiencing the world as it is, time is a function of your intentionality. So whether you're in a third order, second order, or first order mode of awareness, your experience of time is going to be a function of your engagement, the kind of noticing or not noticing. And when you're fully engaged, you're unaware of the so-called passage of time. And so it's not brought to your attention or your consciousness. In the same way, I want to say, just as you cannot manage time, you cannot manage pain, or you can only manage pain by being engaged in the activity. It has to become a part of your process, of your engagement with the world. Okay, that said, now what I'd like to do, let me just stop for a minute. Does anyone have any questions of anything I've said so far, which is really just setting this up? What I'm going to do next is show you a video I've shown you before, but my purpose is to show you again Toi Sensei's cosmology, if you will, because it's completely consistent with everything that I'm going to share with you. So I'm going to show you a video in a second. But before we do that, are there any questions that you have thus far, even though I'm just setting it up, somewhat dramatically maybe, but that's what I'm doing. Okay, I don't see anyone raising their hand, so we'll proceed. Okay, so once again, I did this one time before. I think it was part 3 of Sai Kon Tong. And I shared with you, again, the book trailer for Living with the Wind at Your Back. The reason why is it's an economical use of 4 minutes, because I'm going to remind you, when you hear the script, I want you to pay attention to the script. The script is like the world according to Toi Sensei, but it's also, as a man of modernity, I'm also going to share with you, it's also the worldview of science. It's going to take me some time to unpack those connections, but with your permission, Rich, if you could roll I think it's 4 minutes.
Imagine what your life would be like if each day you felt as though the entire universe was working with you as a steady, powerful, and uplifting ally. Do you think this kind of life is actually possible? Well, it is possible. And understanding how to live this way is as simple as it is profound. The universe has a rhythm, and when you learn to think and act in accord with that rhythm, you begin to live as though your sail is always full. You are living with the wind at your back. Our experience of life is shared. We see, hear, taste, touch, feel, and think about a world that we have in common. However, how we react to the world around us can lead us down 2 paths. We can either interpret ourselves as being alone, not good enough, or a victim of our circumstances, or we can learn how to be connected and choose to be a positive, empowered individual possessing the tools to live our life in accord with our highest values and aspirations. In my new book, Living with the Wind at Your Back, I describe 7 arts to positively transform your life. The 7 arts include the art of preparation, the art of compassion, the art of responsibility, the art of relaxation, the art of conscious action, the art of living naturally, and the art of service. While the 7 arts exercises will serve as your toolkit, it is your own personal experience that will serve as both beacon and benchmark, helping you to make steady progress towards your goals. The 7 arts change process enables you to navigate the ups and downs of your daily life because you will be living in complete harmony with the principles of the universe. I tell stories in this book, drawing from my own eclectic path as a ski racer, a student of the martial art of Aikido, a professor of Asian studies and philosophy, and as a performance development consultant, helping to improve the performance of Fortune 500 businesses as well as professional athletes and musicians. Throughout my journey, I was asking simple questions and then learning to discover answers by actually testing them. I was looking for universal principles that are practical and work when applied against the test of my own daily life experience. You have to put your answers to the test to see if they really work by applying them at home, at work, and at play. Let's keep it simple. It's possible to go on a personal development retreat for a few days to better yourself, but it is a temporary relief away from the real challenges of your daily life. Lasting change requires a toolkit for daily life, not retreat life. The 7 arts provides the tools of patience and discipline, cultivated drop by drop in the midst of our real life challenges. All that is necessary is for you to put yourself in the right rhythm and relationship with the universe that supports your very existence at every single moment. The truth is, the universe always is and has always been at your back. You are never truly separate and alone. At every precious moment, your life is sustained by your deep connection to the single unifying force of the universe. The good news is that you can experience this connection for yourself. Practicing the 7 arts will enable you to function and live in accord with the rhythm of the universe. This is living with the wind at your back. I wish you well on your journey of positive self-transformation.
Okay, are we back? Rich, we're good on speaker, however you're supposed to be? Okay. Okay, so thank you for seeing that again. If you were paying attention to the script and maybe also think about this topic of managing pain, hopefully this will all come together with time. Toi Sensei was a man of modernity, which means he believed in science and he believed in trying to teach, mimicking the scientific method, as I have explained to you before, where when you teach someone keep one point, he always sets conditions where there's only one variable, which is where you direct your mind, where you direct your attention, on the top of your head, right? Or keeping one point. And both times you should physically stand in the exact same way. Well, that's completely Toi Sensei. Well, if I were to lean on some of my astrophysicist friends and other scientific friends and just other pieces of trivia that you would know, let me just give you a couple illustrations how we know we're one with the universe. Okay, just looking at the science of it. So let's consider our heart. Or better yet, well, no, we'll do that. I'm probably going to jump around because I have this massive sheets of paper that I'm just pulling from. We all have a heart. So right now we're in this session and all of us, our heart is beating right now. We all have that in common. So as I look around and I see you and I know your heart is beating. Well, so is mine. How is that possible? How is it that we actually have a shared heartbeat? You know why? Because for our blood to move, right, for us even to have a macromolecule like this, we need an element called iron. Iron is at the center of these molecules that allow oxygen to be shared. That process of oxygenating our blood would not be possible without that iron atom. Well, where did that atom come from? Supernovas, multiple supernovas. You know, the universe is 13.7 billion years old. The Earth is 4.5 billion years old, okay? The elements that make up the planetary systems had to be created by exploding stars, supernovas. And then, okay, you would think, okay, once it explodes, it's going to entropy, like the second law of thermodynamics. How could it possibly combine? But what you have is a collision of exploding stars in the universe. What astrophysicists call galactic collisions, where different exploding stars from different galaxies collide and then mix up. But anyway, this is how we get basic elements that you can't even have a planet or living organisms without such things as, say, iron. So in a fundamental sense, we all come from the same stuff. So that's just a little tidbit on your heart. How about breath? We're all breathing right now. We have something in common. Sophia's yawning. Matthew's falling asleep because it's very different time zone for him. You know, I'm like teaching class. I can look around and see your faces, right? But that tells me, okay, but one thing I do as I look around, yep, you're all breathing all right. So how is that possible? So I just said the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Well, for most of that time, there wasn't oxygen enough for creatures like us to be around. So for example, 3 billion years ago on Earth, here's our atmosphere: 80% nitrogen, 19% carbon dioxide, oxygen only 0.05, 0.5% oxygen, and then everything else 1%. This was an environment that could not sustain organisms such as ourselves. But it could sustain really small singular cellular eukaryotic cells, which we would call blue-green algae. Okay, that blue-green algae developed something really tricky that, as far as we know, has never been done in the universe. It's called photosynthesis. It's the process of converting sunlight and then converting CO2 into oxygen. Well, it only took 3 billion years for blue-green algae, the only organisms on our Earth, to create enough oxygen that it would actually come up from the ocean, actually get into our atmosphere, combine with things like on the side of hills that look rusty, that's iron oxide. That's basically oxygen and iron having a good time on a rock face. I think it was 700 million years ago, there was enough oxygen to create the ozone. Okay, you need the ozone because the sun's penetrating rays would kill any kind of organism other than like single eukaryotic cells. So the possibility of every plant and animal that you can think of, including animals that were extinct, that the possibility of that developmental structure for larger organisms was not even possible before 700 million years ago. You need an ozone to protect the possibility of life like this. Okay, so think of it. We talk about drop by drop training, shugyo. Think about if you're a little eukaryotic cell, you're doing this for 3 billion years, giving your life only to convert a little bit more oxygen to create the atmosphere that we have today necessary to sustain our life. So when Toi Sensei says, when you're experiencing that you are the universe and the universe is you, there's a lot of deep ways for you to sense this connection. With a little bit of information and getting out of your own way, this is really interesting stuff. Because our breath is connected in this way. How about our minds? Right now, we're all thinking, listening. We're in various states of emotion, of alertness. So your mind is operating, I can see, because you're there on the screen, and I can feel that. Well, how is this possible that our minds are connected, that are actually linked together in structural ways? I'm going to give you an example that I think Ileana will appreciate. She's actually picking up Alina from school right now, which is why she's not on the call. Okay, a piano. Think of the beautiful, beautiful music. Just think of great musicians, concert performances. Think of the emotion, the passion, the power, the sensitivity that can be brought out by the instrument called a piano that was not invented until like 1700. Now, what we know from neuroscience is pianists and the movement of your digits, well, I say pianists, the movement of our fingers takes up a very significant part of our somatosensory cortex. A big bunch of our brain size is dedicated to the manipulation of our fingers. And when you are, say, a pianist is actually doing their thing, and now we have the advantages of neuroimaging, the brain is lit up in enormous ways, like it's taking a ton of concentration for pianists to do what they do. But think of it, they learn these patterns and they learn this music. And it's possible then to pass on intergenerationally, because now we can record the music, we can write down the music, we have musical language. And so unlike other learning machines like DNA that does learn, the problem is the DNA learns, maybe even just through mutation and then successive regeneration. But the thing is, once it dies, it just dies. So the information's lost. The human brain is different because humans, unlike all other organisms, have developed language. We have a way to record knowledge and information and pass it down intergenerationally. I'm going to talk more about this. I'm looking at the clock. Maybe this is going to be 10 sessions because I'm taking such a deep dive here. But this is also relevant because all of us now have patterns in our brain that is very much a function of the time when we're living here in society. So just as there's intergenerational transmission of music, think of inventions now, think of the whole discipline of science, think of new paradigms, think of Einstein. Einstein dies, but his legacy lives on for other generations to study, to critique, and to improve upon. Thomas Edison, inventor, changed a lot of things. He's gone, but guess what? The rest of our collective consciousness, our collective brain, is working with this information, moving it forward. I'm thinking this whole notion of managing pain is like rising to a level that people just haven't thought of yet. So I'm trying to give you lots of background here to give you that context, that donut theory of language, to understand the significance of how our brain learns. One final example of Toi Sensei saying we're connected to the key of the universe. I know one person who refers to what we are now is a continuous flame of what he calls interbecoming. Interbecoming. What is that? What's interbecoming? Let me just share some information with you. 98% of all the atoms in our body cycle out in a year. Each day, 7% of our body mass changes every day. I'm going to break it down for you. 1.05 kilograms of solids we consume. 2.5 kilograms of liquids. That's just us hydrating ourselves, as well as the liquid that we get in the food that we eat. And almost an milligram, 0.8 kilograms of air. That's 7% of us. That's like one arm. So if you think of it, every single day, the you tomorrow is going to be different by a factor of one arm. You'll grow a new arm by tomorrow. Joyce would say, you know, when you're in this first order mode, you just feel this aliveness. You just feel this connection, no separation. You know, when I start talking about skin breathing and feeling your heartbeat, you know, all this is really, really happening, and it's available to you if you just start thinking about things. Shaner Sensei would say you have to change your concept. So I'm giving you a lot of background to change your concept about your relationship with pain as we get here. So, okay, so that would say that in 2 weeks, you change your entire biomass of your body. But some smart, clever scientist people, like maybe yourself in the audience, would say, yeah, well, not 100%. What about dense things, you know, like calcium, like your bone? Well, even your calcium will switch out within 1 year. So what are we, if we're interbecoming all the time, just for our continued survival, we're not separate. What we are now with our global connected society, you know, it was only 500 years ago. Well, let me even back up here. When was it? 10,000 years ago, we figured out farming, and that allowed groups of Homo sapiens to actually migrate around the earth and begin to occupy different climates. 10,000 years ago. It was only 500 years ago that we actually started connecting continents, like through shipping and other cultures. Now we've got telecommunications, the internet. What we have right now is a collective becoming, a global interbecoming, which is the consciousness of all of us together, changing at dramatically fast rates, and capable, because of language and writing, we're able to store this information and pass it on to the next generation. Okay. Rich, what's next? Is it the publications? I think that's where we're going. Is that right?
It was your personal story if you wanted to.
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, okay, so we'll go in different shifts here. Yeah, okay, so if you could bring up, I basically forgot to say that. This is a shattered right leg. This x-ray was taken, I think, a long time ago, 13 years ago. But the point is if you look there, of course it's a photo, so it's reversed. But can you see the bow? Look where my ankle is, and then look at how bowed it is. The shaft of my leg comes out of my ankle at a 7-degree cant. So for example, when I was ski racing, if you had a straight ski boot like this, like the bottom of the boot, and then the upper cuff comes up straight, my right leg naturally leans because it healed crooked. So my upper body weight is constantly standing not over the center of my right foot, but it's way over the outside, like dropping a plumb line down there. It's also a 1/4 inch shorter than the other leg. This change of balance is really critical when you spend a lifetime where your weight is coming off the side of your foot, putting all this pressure down the side of your leg from your knee to your ankle. If you go to the next slide, Rich, it's not just the bowing, but at the very bottom there, where you see that the tibia hit the talus, in the back there towards the heel, you see a little gap, which is what it's supposed to be with stuff between, but where it starts to smear white there, it's just bone on bone. The tibia, the larger bone, which is all bent and crooked and wide and thickened because they just healed that way, but also it's just bone on bone. So with every step, there's aggravation. And then all of the tendons and ligaments with all the pressure being on the outside, I've torn him so many times. It's just like my MRI reads like, you know, just a crazy moose tracks. It's a mess. Okay, but anyway, I just forgot to mention that. Okay, Rich, what's up next? Yeah, we're taking this really slow, aren't we? So, well, let me just do this. Any questions so far? I know I'm just presenting, you know, maybe basic science stuff. So I suspect you don't have questions yet. All right. Well, I'm going slow. I'm taking my time. Okay, if we could go back then. So here's an interesting story in my life that it just happened. In 1985-86, I received a fellowship to teach at Harvard University. And so Furman gave me a leave of absence, 1985-86. When I was there, I was supposed to, or my office was in the Yenching Library, which is the largest collection of Asian language materials, primary language materials anywhere outside Asia, the Yenching Library at Harvard. And my office was there, and I was supposed to be studying with this world famous Buddhologist, Masatoshi Nagatomi, and I did. But I spent much more of my time because the Yenching Library is situated just adjacent to the Museum of Comparative Zoology. And this was a time in scientific history, especially biology, that was just the cutting edge of biology at this time. And right across the street were two polar opposite biologists, equally famous in the world of science. The father of sociobiology, Edward O. Wilson, whose name is on this journal, the Personalist Forum. I was asked to be the guest editor of this journal in the spring of 1987. And to my amazement, I mean, for me, honestly, humbly, to just look at that and say, oh my God, I'm publishing with Edward O. Wilson, the father of sociobiology, one of the most famous scientists in the world, and Marvin Minsky, the father of artificial intelligence, the person who wrote the super famous book, The Society of Mind, where he proposed how consciousness works in neural networks, and that AI is actually mimicking the neural networks and the way the brain learns. Okay, he taught at MIT. He was friends with Ed Wilson, also Stephen Jay Gould, super famous biologist. But little old me, David Shaner, right there, cutting edge, state-of-the-art stuff with these world famous scholars. Well, why am I even telling you about this? Because it's all about neuroplasticity. I was interested in neuroplasticity much more than looking at my Buddhist texts that year, because I had access to Stephen Jay Gould, whose theory of neoteny, or patomorphic morphology, made a huge influence on me because it explained the possibility of cultural evolution. Now, I'm a comparative philosopher, and I was interested in the following question. Why is it that cultures are willing to go to war because we're so rigid, we can't understand the worldview of the other person? We are unwilling to put ourselves in the place of the other person, and we have armed nuclear weapons. Okay? I thought to myself, this could easily be a crisis. You know, 65 million years ago, an asteroid hit the Earth and all the dinosaurs and everything else died. Little mammals like mouse continued, and lucky for us, you know, without that asteroid hitting 65 million years ago, we probably wouldn't be here. Okay, but neoteny is a characteristic of hominid evolution. Human beings have one of the longest childhoods of the entire animal kingdom. We do not reach sexual maturity until like 14, 15, 16 years old. Okay, when you watch Bambi on Walt Disney in the very beginning, right? Bambi's born, and what does Bambi do? Stands up, walks, hangs out with its mom, follows, knows how to eat. It can take care of itself. Human beings are utterly dependent upon our guardians to care for us an inordinately long time. Well, good thing, because we're born as living embryos. Why? Because if the head got any bigger after 9 months, childbirth would be too dangerous for Homo sapiens. And up until modern medicine, childbirth was very, very dangerous for any mother. So we're born because the maximum size at 9 months, that's when, you know, the live birth can take place. But our brain, unlike other organisms, develops postnatally. So all of the axon neuron node-link structures, all those neural networks that was just beginning to be proposed by people like Marvin Minsky, was the mechanism for me to understand how people could learn. For example, my easiest example is language. You've got Broca's area over here. If you're born in whatever country you're in, okay, I'm looking at you, Toby. You're born in the Netherlands. Were you born in the Netherlands? Okay, so you're born in the Netherlands, but what happens if in the first 24 hours you're swaddled up and you're now swaddled up very kindly by your new parents. You've been adopted by parents, and you're going to live in Beijing with your new family, and you're still genetically who you are, Toby. But at 24 hours, you are now taken to Beijing to be raised by your new family that adopted you. Well, you're probably going to speak Chinese. I don't know if you'll have ever learned Dutch or French or German or English. It all depends on who your parents were. But the point is how much of Toby is the same Toby, and how much of Toby, based on his brain literally developing postnatally in response to an environment that is utterly different than, oh, I'm glad I chose you because I know your parents, right? So utterly different than the influence of your mom and dad, who I love. Okay, so it kind of begs the question, who are you really? And why do you think the way you think is necessarily absolutely correct? Okay, I just use that as an example to suggest, could you go back to the deck there, Rich? Well, for me, it was a mechanism to understand why literally the axon neuron structures in Broca's area, in Toby's case, might now be reflecting Chinese. The Chinese syntax, grammar, is literally reflected in your biology. And oh, by the way, this makes so much sense. Oh, perfect example, Toby. I got lucky with you as the example. Someone like Toby, or living in the world where Toby lives, it is totally common. Like 3 languages is basic, right? For Toby, it could be like 5 is more common, right? If you add Flemish and, you know, all of it, right? So the idea is you didn't have to work at that. Why? Because you grew up in a bilingual or trilingual environment, your home. So you would go back and forth between Dutch, German, French, you know, it's just, and guess what? That was happening when Broca's area was developing. Here's a question. If you start studying foreign language in college and you've never been exposed to the language yet, you're already hardwired for English or your native language. It's really, really hard because biologically, the time to learn multiple languages is to teach people really, really young. Okay, now at the time here, 1987, okay, Marvin Minsky was writing The Society of Mind. That's actually the same title as his super famous book. And by the way, other people that were my heroes in this period, Gerald Elderman, the idea of selection operating at the level of neurons, he received a Nobel Prize in medicine and physiology, by the way, Gerald Elderman. Neurodarwinism was the hottest thing. And like I was at the epicenter of all this stuff. His other book, The Remembered Present, on how memory works. Another book, Topobiology by Elderman. All this, Topobiology. Other books on the nature of human plasticity, developmental plasticity. All this stuff was the rage. And I was like at the epicenter of it because I was using this research and this understanding of neuroplasticity to understand the possibility of developing culturally independent worldviews. And the kicker here, if you go to the next slide, the kicker here is then this work developed into my second book with 2 Japanese authors. But the first part of this is all about how we learn cultural evolution, neoteny, and its ramifications for ethics. So this was like, I think this book came out in 1989. And then the next slide, Rich. So sorry to, it sounds self-serving. I'm just trying to, with some enthusiasm, let you know. This was the journal Human Evolution. I mean, I'm not a trained scientist, but for me to publish in the journal Human Evolution, neuroplasticity and temporal retardation of development, patomorphic morphology, that in commonplace, that's neoteny in human evolution, a consideration of the biological requirements for the plasticity of human cognition and the potential acquisition of culturally dependent ethical worldviews. I thought it was important for us to get a handle on why we think so rigidly, because maybe we might, not hit the button so fast if we understand why we get stuck on our ways of thinking. I was right and I was wrong in the best possible ways. Boy, we're really going slow here, aren't we, Rich? Okay, I had no idea it would be this slow. Okay, but here's how I was right. The theory for cultural evolution is exactly the case because, okay, I was just talking about 1987, 88, 89, 90, these publications. Well, guess what? Many, many years later, the neuroscience has advanced tremendously in the last 20 some years. So what I want to do when we get back, I guess next week, is to pick up and to say, what happened to neuroscience since I was dabbling with neuroplasticity, understanding that the brain learns and changes its structure with learning. What I'm going to get to is you can do that managing pain. Because good news, I was wrong. The theory of plasticity and the focus on children. And oh, by the way, Marvin's wife was a pediatrician. He lived in Brookline by Boston University. And his examples in his book, The Society of Mind, was observing children like he was putting together the whole tapestry of how consciousness works by kind of watching how children might play with boxes and building blocks. It might seem a bit disjointed, but the way our brain works are societies of neural networks, each performing different functions. And what we understand now, 25 years later, is super exciting. I want to explain that next week. I feel like there was some punchline there because I'm stopping much earlier than I thought. Science and comparative. Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you to myself for remembering that. Where I was wrong is that what we thought is neuroplasticity would stop around 25 to 30 years old. What we suffered from, we thought, past tense, was jokingly hardening of the categories. We talk about hardening of the arteries, like heart disease, but this was hardening of the categories, that is hardening of the structures of how you think. And that became a real good model to understand where intolerance comes from, where people are unwilling or seemingly unable to put themselves in the place of somebody with a completely different worldview. The good news is we were wrong. Neuroplasticity continues, even for old dogs like me, even for older dogs like Gardner Sensei, who I'm looking at right now. You see, there's still hope, Gardner Sensei. So you're going to find out, Gardner Sensei, that article that you sent me about slow repetition, I guess that's going to come up next week because I didn't have enough time to get into the actual structure of neurons and how they learn and how they can be trained, if you will, through our attention. So I think what I'm going to do is stop here and say, next week, where I'm going to pick off, oh, by the way, how many of you, raise your hand if you actually looked at that video that I was in the announcement? Oh, great. Thank you very much. Okay. Well, I figured that was too much for the talk because it was 8 minutes, but I would love it if you would look at it again. If you haven't, next time, before next time. And then I'm going to show you another one because we're going to take a bit of a deep dive into the neuroscience of pain and pain perception. And with all that, then I'm going to start talking about key principles, 3 orders of body-mind awareness, and developing effective strategies for how to respond to as-felt pain, as I have been doing for 51 years. But I just followed Toy Sensei. He said, "You want a bright, happy life or a dark, gloomy one?" I was like, "Bright, happy, Sensei." So I said, "Oh, well, pain is dark and gloomy. I'll just turn my attention," which is why I said I just don't think about it. But I think that's probably not a very good strategy to try to teach someone to just say, don't think about your pain. Might not even be very responsible, because pain is a good evolutionary thing. It's telling you something's wrong, right? So pain has a real good purpose for our survival. But catastrophizing pain, which is what the brain can do when it's repetitive, you're going to end up teaching your neural network how to react explosively in an excitatory way because of where you're putting your attention. And fortunately, it might sound like gobbledygook, but I'm going to give you good peer-reviewed literature and help you to understand the mechanisms. Because if you do, and you understand the principle, just like Toy Sensei, then you can apply it to friends, relatives, yourself. Not like you're going to go out and fix the world and claim you're a doctor. But when it comes to self-care, managing personal as-felt pain, I think I've got a good story for you for where you can understand it very clearly, scientifically, as well as in your own body. And it's just following key principles. It's just that now I can share all the science behind it. Here's a funny thing too. When I was engaged in all that neuroplasticity, Toy Sensei was really interested in that. And he used to say, and I bet you can ask other old timers who remember this, Toy Sensei used to tell us, science is going to discover mind has particles. And, we thought, oh boy, Toy Sensei, okay, Sensei, what? Like, mind has particles? What are you talking about? He was just convinced that science was going to be able to understand this notion of, and he would say, mind has particles. And then he'd go like this, sending particles. And I was like, we didn't know. He didn't go into any details. But in a very interesting way, if your mind is the summation of neurons firing or not as a result of hitting an action potential that either polarizes the cell or doesn't, that's pretty much ions and particles affecting your consciousness. So it's kind of an interesting story to put all these themes together. I've now expanded beyond my world record, but I'm happy to go slow. I'm looking forward to future sessions. I hope that it's worth the time and investment of your time, and I definitely appreciate you being here where I can look at you and I'm just not talking to the wall. So just for your facial expressions and your nodding, Toby, Crystal, Matt, I know it was hard for you to stay awake. You're still falling asleep there, man. I feel like I'm at Furman at 8 o'clock and my student is falling asleep. But anyway, I really appreciate it. And Rich, I guess we won't even do questions, but do write to me if you have questions, but I'm pretty excited. I'm pretty stoked because even next week's going to be a lot of fun, or it's fun for me to share the neuroscience. And then on the back of that, well, what do we do about it? And then our training just falls right in place. It's like, well, this is pretty cool. Well, that's how I think of it. All right. I love you guys. I hear that my daughter, 18 years old, with her friends have just come in. I hear it on the other side of that door. So wish me luck. It's going to be an interesting journey here for the next 4 days.
And the drinking age is still 21 in South Carolina.
The drinking age is 21. Yeah, no, we're
okay.
here. Parents, chaperones, we're here. But
right. Good luck.
Yeah, like it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. All right. I love you all.
you,
Thank you
Cynthia.
for your patience.